Hey guys, welcome to my new tier list of 1st of December 2021. We just had a patch a couple of days ago, and with it came a slew of hundreds of balance changes, as well as some bug fixes, as well as some new bugs as well. A tier list right now is going to be focused on what I think the factions in their current strength represent, while trying to ignore as much as possible some of the bugs that will probably be fixed relatively soon. For example, there is a spearman bug right now for the Abbasid dynasty that can have them poke out your eyes from across the map, with stacking a upgrade that is supposed to be unique and stacking it multiple times. We'll try to ignore those as much as possible. Some of the other changes to Delhi Sultanate, some of them seem to be more like a bug, where some research lasts longer than it should, whereas others seem to be mostly intended. The tier list right now will be the factions in their current strength, ignoring obvious exploits, but with the current functionality of how the factions play out. If the civilizations get changed around a lot, bugs or otherwise, and the incoming Springald nerf that has just been announced, that should hit in about a week or so, or less than a week, I could do another tier list to see where we're at then. So without further ado, let's jump in. My previous tier list was like this. I put Mongols on rank 1 for their great flexibility and early aggression. I put English and French on the second tier, tier A, as both of them had really strong feudal options to be aggressive, be it with the longbowmen into a ram rush or the royal cavalry into archer into ram rush from the French. This was also based on the Genesis tournament, the win rates there, and the popularity of the civilizations that were used in this $20,000 tournament. The Rus came up next. A lot of people are playing the Rus, but they were a little harder. They have a great flexibility with the Golden Gate landmark, and as such they were here. Abbasid dynasty was a strong counter faction on and off water into certain factions, including the French. Delhi Sultanate was the special tech faction that would go for a sanctity rush and get the early sacred sites, and then had some pretty cool options with strong men-at-arms in the Third Age that get bonus damage from honed blades, all for free of course, with upgrades that don't cost anything but take a little bit longer. Dead last were Chinese and Holy Roman. Holy Roman, a few important bugs like the prelate not being able to inspire consistently when left to autocast, and the Chinese faction altogether quite difficult, quite a late game monster, but unable to survive a lot of the aggression that people would throw at them in the early game. Since then there have been a number of changes, and I'd like to kind of throw around the status quo and show you which factions I think belong where and explain why. So first of all, I'm gonna put everything on the lowest tier, or in fact I think I can, I'm gonna put them on the lowest tier, and then I will explain where everything goes. So let's jump into the tier list. On number 1, on tier S, I'm going to be placing the Mongols still. Not much has changed with the Mongols. What makes them strong is a combination of different things. Mongols enjoy bonus gold from the steppe redoubt. The steppe redoubt is a landmark that acts as a drop-off point for all resources, and when you drop gold off here, it is increased by 50%. You're still gathering the same amount, be it 4,000 total from a gold node or 8,000, but you're dropping off 50% more. This is an incredibly big resource advantage that really only costs them the landmark that they want to be getting anyway. It's pretty sick. And then together with the Uvu at the Dark Ages, they're able to mass produce units. For the price of 1, they can produce 2 units. And while you won't have enough stone to constantly sponsor this unit bonus, you can do it often enough to put Dark Age or feudal aggression to a point where Mongols control the pace of the game. Outposts are cheap and offer Yam network, and the first landmark that they make, the Deer Stones, is also pretty crazy. Since my last tier list, I've gotten to know the game better, and well, what Deer Stones offer is Yam network for free. Normally it is required to get at the outpost right here, and it costs you 350 resources, and you only get it in Castle Age after upgrading Yam network. So it's Castle Age plus 1 minute, and then you've got it. And the deer stones offer you this basically from feudal onwards for all of your units all the time. Even when you go outside of the radius, it still affects you for a while. Bonus movement speed on all your economy and your army. It's pretty insane. And there was a nerf that took that movement speed away from... no, there was no nerf about this. The signal arrow has been nerfed for siege. But overall, this does incredible for Mongols. And they've got great economy improvement with deer stones, then again with step redoubt, to the point that Mongols don't ever even need to make a second town center. While their second town center does cost 900 instead of 700, town center is a luxury for them, as they have enough economic damage inflicted to an opponent and gained themselves through these tools that Mongols is, in my opinion, some of the best. Coupled with the blacksmith that can get the bonus upgrade to give siege building in the field. So when you take their siege engineering, you can build siege towers and battering rams in the field. But if you upgrade it with an additional investment of, I believe, 300 or 350 stone, you can also build springles and mangonels and trebuchets in the field. Only Abbasid dynasty can normally build those in the field. And those two factions have this unique functionality, and it's really strong. They can completely skip siege workshops and use men-at-arms and archers and crossbows to build these on the front line. So, Mongols, my number one. Then, the next two that I think are very close, not as far as before, is gonna be Chinese and Rus. So, let's talk about Rus first. Rus. Why is Rus strong right now? Just like before, they have a pretty strong late game with springles that get 13.5 range. So their springles have 10 range, and then most factions have springles that have 10 range. You can then upgrade them to 12 range, and Rus can actually upgrade them to 13.5 range in total, and that makes them outrage other springles. Now, it is interesting that springles are going to be nerfed perhaps in just 5 days from now, and therefore they may not be as universal of a unit that is going to be dominating pretty much almost every other unit. And what's interesting is, if and when springles get nerfed, and I don't know exactly how, right now they do 60 damage plus 20 against siege. My suggestion would be they do 40 damage plus 40 against siege, or maybe 30 damage plus 50 against siege, or even 20 damage plus 80 against siege, making them an anti-siege unit. And while that does make them better into bombers, mangonels, and counterweight trebuchet, or makes them equally good, depending on what nerf they're going to be getting, could even be something not to do with damage, I don't know what the devs are going to do, because you can't just spam them and take down men-at-arms, knights, and archers as easily, they wouldn't be around as often to deal with those threats. And the interesting point that I want to point out is that that's going to make mangonels a lot better. Various factions have splash damage, for example fire lancers and grenadiers for Chinese, or perhaps the Landsknecht for the Holy Roman Empire. But splash damage, maybe there's about 6 or 7 sources in this game. Demolition Ship and the ones I mentioned and Mangonel. It's a little bit more rare, the burning oil from the keep. Mangonel is your main splash damage unit, but because everyone always has 10 springles at the higher levels of play, Mangonel becomes useless. And it's going to be a lot more popular, which will also be an indirect nerf to archer balls, hand cannon balls, crossbow balls, which will then make things that get countered by those better. So it's going to have a really big impact on the meta when springles get nerfed, but as it stands, Rus still benefits from that. For the rest, they get a lot of bonus gold from their gathering. Every animal that they kill. And I must say that they did just nerf animation cancelling. It wasn't listed in the patch notes, but animation cancelling means that you aren't getting deer and wolf kills as quickly as before. I should say that most military units can still animation cancel. For example, an elephant from the Delhi can attack every 1 second instead of every 3.5 seconds if you cancel the backswing animation. But Rus was using this, and counterplay to Rus was using this, to kill deer packs quickly. And while that does nerf Rus, it also nerfs counterplay to Rus. It does mean that everyone is killing deer more slowly, which means Rus isn't getting their gathering bonus as quickly. But overall, the fact that Rus is still making multiple scouts easily means that they'll get more deer probably than before. Because before, if you were lucky and you were Holy Roman or Delhi and you sent your scout around and you happened to find 2 deer packs, you could dispatch those if they're close to one another in like 10-15 seconds. And 2 deer packs is half of the deer packs on the map. But now, if Rus has like 3-4 scouts going around, the chance that they find you in the middle of your first or second deer pack is much greater, and they'll start contesting some of those. And multiple scouts, like 2 scouts, can 2-shot. They can do a 1-shot on a deer. Before, your micro and your skill and your sense of timing and mind game, you could maybe deny some of the Rus deer by waiting until they do 1 shot, then you do your shot, or you do a shot and then you quickly animation cancel, you do a second shot into the same deer, and then they miss their attempt to steal it. That is no longer possible. So now 2 scouts will always defeat 1 scout because they can synchronize their shot and 1-shot a deer. So overall, I would say that the Rus scouts will have an edge against races, against faction civilizations that try to get away with just 1 scout. And perhaps people will adapt and go for more Dark Age scouts against Rus in order to adapt for this. But that's a win for Rus because that costs you a villager. So I'd say that the gathering bonus is still pretty similar. And then there's an emerging new strategy that's very effective for Rus. All of the hunting cabins and stables together can make mass scouts, which is a pretty tanky, self-regenerating, good vision and good fire damage unit that can be a great damage sponge and a killer of enemy siege. And they combine that with mass horse archers. This emerging strategy sees the Rus go from Dark Ages to Castle or even Imperial on a single TC if they like, or they can squeeze in the second TC at some point. Mounted precision makes sure that horse archers remain relevant into the late game, as you can see here, the 2 extra range. So yeah, I think Rus has been very effective with this strategy. The Golden Gate landmark that they have offers them a lot of bonus, flexibility. It only gives them 50 resources per minute, which isn't a lot, but the flexibility in choosing how you gather your resources and then how you use it is really interesting. For example, they could choose to just allocate every single villager to a wooden and fortress endowed lumber camp, get 1,000+ lumber, and then on a whim they can decide to buy 300 stone and expand to a second town center. Or they can convert that wood in the course of 3 to 4 minutes to a number of points of gold and get upgrades from it, or to even go to Castle Age. It's all really flexible, and they can get information first from an opponent and then make a decision. A well-played Rus is therefore very flexible and able to be aggressive, dominate the map with professional scout deer retrievals, and go to fast castle and then apply horse archer pressure. That's my opinion right now, and that's why I think I put them in the tier A. Now let's talk about Chinese. Chinese is a faction that has been slowly uptrending. They build faster, they build walls and towers and buildings faster, and Imperial Official can actually do a tripling in production and research speed. The recent patch has seen the Chinese be allowed to and able to supervise blacksmiths with their Imperial Official, in addition to universities and even keeps. That means that you can upgrade a keep's springald emplacement in just 10 seconds if you have an official nearby and use it. It's very flexible. You can pump out springalds or a clock tower nest of bees, which have also been buffed, in 10 and 12 seconds respectively. 10 and 13. Pretty crazy. Astronomical Clock Tower still offers 50% bonus health on every single unit you make out of the clock tower. And you never need to go for a siege workshop as Chinese, because an Imperial Official on the clock tower is all you ever need. It counts as 3 workshops when you oversee the work in the clock tower, and all of them have 50% bonus health. Whoever needs more than 3 workshops? Pretty much never. The weakness of Chinese has been getting Ramolint in H2, but I feel like people are getting better and better, and I'm playing a lot of Chinese, I'm getting better with it too, at defending early pressure with them. You can quickly switch tech and defend with a unit of choice by fast building your production and then overseeing it. So even if you've got nothing going for you in the sense of military, and you scout a bunch of longbows or men-at-arms or horsemen or cavalry coming, you can quickly prepare for that by building those buildings, overseeing them with an official, and then spamming out archers or spears or horsemen, or even if you're on Song Dynasty, Tsugunu. Chinese faction is harder to play. They have many different orders of play that they can do. They can go Dark Age feudal castle with a single town center and nothing special. Then they can get early clock tower buildings, which I think more and more is going to be clock tower Nest of Bees, as they were buffed 25% in damage output, making them a much greater rival to Mangonel. They're also faster, so they can escape danger more easily. Or they can go one town center with Song Dynasty by making their second building for going feudal. Song Dynasty means that villagers produce 1.5 times as fast as other villagers, which means that it's like they have 1.5 town center pumping villagers without actually needing to invest a second town center. It does mean you need to get both of these, of course, but it's a great, slightly cheaper way to get bonus economy without overcommitting to a more killable second town center. Or on turtley maps, or in the right situation, you can do it both. Second town center and Song Dynasty. Now you're pumping from the equivalent of 3 town centers worth of villager production. It's very powerful. And you can combine that with going castle. Overall, Chinese have many different ways that they can gear their economy and their tech route, and they now have cheaper Tsugunu. They've got the much more and more looked at Fire Lancer, who is fantastic at taking down buildings, clumps of villagers with their splash area of effect cavalry charge. They've got 50 fire damage against buildings, and they're pretty cheap and spammable, especially when you build them around the final landmark, the Spirit Way. 30% reduction in cost of dynastic units being produced there. It's pretty cool. And let's not even talk about the Grenadier yet. No, let's talk about it. The Grenadier that you unlock from Ming Dynasty, from the archery range. This unit is one of the craziest. It's like a spammable, albeit somewhat expensive, but it is a spammable unit that will just destroy clumps of units. I have had many games where it looked like I was chanceless, was able to squeeze out Ming Dynasty, and then Grenadiers just absolutely slapping. You can destroy clumps of hand cannoneers or crossbows or archers. Spears and men-at-arms are getting completely molested, and it's only the knights that really aren't getting splashed as quickly. Well, depending on how many Grenadiers you've got. Very, very strong target. Very strong unit. So, yeah, I think Chinese are actually rank 1 or top 3 in terms of civilization strength right now on my tier list. I'm just going to keep them here for until proven otherwise, because they do still need to survive to get to some of that strength. But they're top 3 in my mind for sure, if not top 2 or even top 1. Okay, now let's go to the next tier. We've got French, Abbasid, we've got Holy Roman, English, and Delhi. First, let's get everyone away from that icky tier D spot. Only Delhi deserves to be there. The color matches, the letter matches. This is tier Delhi. Tier Delhi is a special tier that only they deserve to be at right now. Unfortunately, the most valid way to play has been taken away in the Dark Ages, where Delhi would rush with Sanctity and basically creating a unique playstyle that there was a bit of a statement on by the developers in a blog yesterday, in a video stream. There was a developer stream, and they said the Sanctity rush is something a little bit less intended, that forced too much counterplay from the opponent, and it forced Delhi too much to commit to it. Basically what happened is that at 4 minute 30 or 5 or 5 minute 30 or 6 minutes, Sanctity upgrade would be complete, and they would send several scholars to capture various sacred sites to secure bonus gold. Delhi's economy bonuses are the following. They can get that gold from Sanctity, 200 gold per minute per site. They have free upgrades for all research, saving resources on that. And that also means that they are getting more economy upgrades from the lumber camp. They're always going to get each one that's available when it is available. They're going to get all of these whenever it is available. So that is strong, and it does kick in, and it does help their economy. But they have no bonus villager production. They have no great way to save their villagers from early aggression from other factions, as none of the units that Delhi has in between Dark Age and Feudal Age are particularly useful at securing a map control advantage. The only thing that they do have is the early, cheap and fast produced scholars. From the mosque, 45 seconds, 150 gold. That's slow and expensive. But from the Dome of the Faith, we are producing a 75 gold scholar. And you can make multiple from the multiple mosques that you have. So although it showed here as 150 gold, trust me, from the landmark it's 75 gold. So they can have scholars in the early game, but typically without all of their upgrades, they're not as effective in small micro battles as some other units. So Delhi often struggles with getting some of their villagers killed, being forced to overinvest into spears and horsemen and archers in order to try to get to the late game, where they are able to use some of that free madrasa research to pull ahead. Where other factions need to spend resources, they do it for free. 22 minutes and 30 seconds is a long time to wait for an upgrade, and while scholars can speed it up, and I haven't tested yet how many you need in order to be on par with different civilizations, but someone on my YouTube did test it, and he said you need 55 garrison scholars to get this down to the same time as other factions spend on it. 55 scholars is quite a lot. It's quite a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think anyone is ever going to have 55 scholars. And you need like 9 in Dark Ages to match other people's research time. It means that Delhi is unlikely to ever have very sharp timings to do ram rushes when you need to spend that many scholars. Though I will say, perhaps we haven't seen it all yet. Perhaps we will see a scholar military efficiency push with efficient production, a bonus production on archers and spears, and a quick ram rush, even though you don't have the ram upgrade in time most likely. But then it's a kind of a late ram rush, 12 minutes instead of 7, 8, 9 or 10 like other civs do. So you come in with 12 minutes and then you bring like the 9 scholars you had to boost the research, and then you're like healing things and you're winning the battle. But I have trouble seeing that that's really how it's going to be going down. What made Delhi great and perhaps worthy of a top 5 notation before the latest patch hit is that Sanctity allowed Delhi to prepare for a Dark Age battle. It meant that English, which won a push with longbowmen from their council hall, were forced to make spears or extra scouts or super rush their council hall to get early longbows to contest your sites. And that uncomfortability that other factions had to do before they were ready hurt their economy and regular preferred flow, and that kind of pulled other civs down to Delhi's level. It's like, our early game sucks, but we are gonna go for these sites. So you're forced to fight with us there, make the whole game messy, screw your build order, and you're forced to make a change and play with us. It was a fun playstyle for Delhi. Dev said they didn't like how one-dimensionally required it was for both civilizations to fight over it. I do understand it. I do disagree a bit because I thought it was a lot of fun from both sides. It's like, oh yeah, the Delhi player is going to go for the sites. I need to make earlier spears than necessary. And the thing is, the dev's argument can also be used for other factions. For example, Mongols are always doing rushes with scouts, horsemen, or spears against you as well in Dark Ages. It's not like I can ignore that. I'm gonna have to make my own counter spears as well. And I don't hear an argument where it says, well, Mongols are always forcing Dark Age competition and people don't like being harassed early, therefore we're gonna remove that playstyle and remove all the early options for Mongol early aggression. We don't just want to skip Dark Ages, it needs to be an option for play. And while many civs choose not to, Delhi forced it, and I thought that was fun. But right now that's not an option anymore. I think it would be great if Sanctity was at least researchable in Dark Ages, which now it is not. And then it could finish by the time your feudal finishes. Then you can still do a 5 or 6 minute sacred site capture, you just can't delay your feudal forever in order to go there anymore. But as it stands, you can only start to upgrade it when you get to feudal, which means, well, you can only capture a sacred site at 8 or 9 minutes. And that's when other factions literally have their own castle age ready. Like Rus, they can get to castle before 9 minutes. They can capture the sites at the same time as Delhi, the specialist in it, except they actually have good units there. So Delhi's best playstyle was taken away. Now let's talk about what is left with them. They still have their elephants, but crossbowmen and spears got better at dealing with heavy, with Delhi having no advantage back to those with their elephants. And while I think a bug or two were fixed with Delhi, there's also new ones where some of these upgrades in the madrasa can take an hour to complete. Currently there's a bug where the more scholars you put inside, the longer something takes instead of the shorter. And while that's probably going to get fixed really early, at the moment there's no reason to play Delhi except, I guess, like masochism. And for this reason, right now Delhi is tier D, which is a pity. I like to play them, but I'll wait until they get improved again. It doesn't mean that Delhi can't win. It's just that I do believe that they are weaker than every other faction right now. Okay, let's go to the next point. Abbasid dynasty. They received a few buffs. Some of their bugs are now not bugged anymore. So if we look at Abbasid dynasty, they have the camel special, the camel specialty, which gives an aura effect to allies and enemies. They also moved a lot of the upgrades out of the House of Wisdom to be in the blacksmith, which means House of Wisdom is allowed to continue upgrading to the next age without having to be forced to get some of the unit special upgrades, which are now in the blacksmith. And if we look at the blacksmith, what is there now, we can see like, oh yeah, they also have camel handling and camel barding now, and they've got the phalanx upgrade, which looks like they haven't listed here yet. They haven't updated this list as of yet. But the phalanx is here as well, and that means that they free up some time for other things for the House of Wisdom to do. It should be noted that that does mean... Phalanx is in the barracks, right. Phalanx is here. And barracks is a really good place to put something like that. It should be noted that barracks and blacksmith will also be a bit more tied up, having to choose between all the different upgrades. It's not 100% a buff. Sometimes House of Wisdom might have been idle and available, where the blacksmith and barracks want to be chugging away at the other upgrades. So it's not strictly speaking a buff, it's a reprioritization that I think makes sense from a design point of view, but is not strictly speaking a buff. For the rest, Abbasid dynasty, like Delhi, has no special units in Dark Age, but they do have a special unit in Feudal Age, but it exists purely within the niche of countering Spearman, the Camel Archer. It counters Spearman, but it does not counter Knights or Archers. It loses to Archers, it loses to Knights, it even loses to Horsemen, despite giving the debuff of damage to Horsemen. It still loses to them cost for cost. It probably beats Crossbowmen and Men-at-Arms though I would have to test. Because of their mobility, they can beat Men-at-Arms, where Archers can almost not or not at all. So they're best against Spears, they're somewhat playable into Horsemen, they help as an aura unit into Horsemen and Cavalry, they lose to Archers, they're more okay into Crossbowmen, but so are Archers, are very okay into Crossbowmen. They're particularly better against Men-at-Arms than Archer because of their higher base damage and their higher mobility. So they're pretty nice. They're pretty nice. Camel Archers are a nice unit, but you can't just mass them like Horse Archers for Rus usually, because they lose too hard to Archers, which seems to be the most pivotal unit for most factions, to go with Archers. And they're a bit better against Horsemen than before the patch. That is true. That is true. So I do think Abbasid went up a bit overall. For the rest, they still have the economy upgrade from the House of Wisdom, where they go for the fresh foodstuffs. Spears are now better in general into cavalry, and they have the upgrade for spears, the phalanx, which of course right now is overperforming if you get it multiple times, which you're not supposed to be able to. But still, double range spears into horses, it makes them better than before. Overall, I think Abbasid is maybe one of the most balanced factions. I'm gonna put them on tier B. I think they're playable. They get some pretty good economy upgrades from the House of Wisdom, where they get the influence area, the Golden Age, and the 60 building Golden Age now means that Abbasid dynasty gets increased production times. That is a very strong late game tech that I think is great. So I'm gonna put Abbasid B for playable. English and French. French before deserved their A spot, and I'm having trouble to determine whether they're still A or B. The Hulk got nerfed. It now has 2 ranged armor instead of, I believe, what it was, 6. And I just had a game yesterday with Chinese against French on water, Boulder Bay, where my archer ships performed a lot better against Hulks than I thought. I eventually ended up losing the water war, but it took him so many Hulks that I was able to win the land war. And I was able to protect my fishing ships for much longer than before. Before 2 Hulks showed up, it was lights out. You lose your 10 fishing ships, you lose your docks, and you lose anything that gets too close to the water. Now he was forced to make 10 plus Hulks. I had 15, 20 plus galley ships, and I even killed many Hulks as well as some fishing ships with my archer boats. So I do think that was a very relevant nerf. Royal Cavalry didn't get nerfed, but their counter, the Spearmen, got buffed in that they always managed to secure a brace mechanic where they do the anti-damage against the charge, they do the root against the cavalry, and then they get a free hit. So yeah, that altogether nerfed French in and of itself. For the rest, they didn't change much. It's just the Hulk nerf, but every other faction changed, and that makes them a little better. I think it's still a strong faction, and it's either, for me, the third A tier faction behind the other 3, or it's the first B tier faction. I'm having trouble determining exactly which one it would be. And it's tough. I don't think it matters a whole lot. It's either here or it's here. But I suspect it might be right here. I do think they're probably better still than Abbasid. They're still producing villagers in 18 seconds, and they still have strong late game with their siege. They get that cheaper siege production from their H4 landmark, which, if we look at it, what's it called? The College of Artillery. Royal Artillery siege engines do 20% more damage. Oh yes. 20% more damage. And that's strong. So that works on the Culverin, the Rebaldequin, and the Cannon. That's pretty good. It's not cheaper, it just does more damage. Right, not cheaper. But more damage is nice. Cannon, Rebaldequin, and Culverin. That's pretty strong. The Guild Hall gives them resources. School of Cavalry is still a free stables, and all of your stables produce faster. And maybe we're gonna see the first men-at-arms play from the French, now that cavalry is not always 100% the correct choice anymore. Because normally, French never made men-at-arms, and while they don't get any special buffs for it, it's still a decent unit. The keep mechanic grants reduced prices, right. Enlistment incentives improves the French influence by reducing units cost by a further 5%. Yeah, the French just have a lot of small little economy advantages, like trade ships return more gold, every building that gathers resources is cheaper, they get the enlistment incentives, villagers produce a little faster. I think I can't put them below the end of tier A, so that's where French go. Now let's talk about English. English had one small change in the patch, in that they received... They can't use setup camp anymore, except when they are not fighting. So no more in-combat healing, and that makes longbowmen a little weaker. That's a pretty big change, and I think it's fair as well to get that change. Setup camp. Longbowmen gain the ability to set up, which heals them for +1 health every 1 second, but it cannot be in battle anymore. For the rest, English is still super solid. The network of castles bonus, the early longbowman pressure, the threat of it anyway, the ease with which they throw up safe food source with cheap farms. I think English is solid. They can produce units from keeps, which reduces the need for them to make siege workshops, because they can get all of their springles, trebuchets, bombards, mangonels from there if they go for keeps. The option to go for a town center landmark via the King's Palace, removing the need to get a town center in other ways while still going to the Third Age. And while English aren't the best at the late game, I think they have enough advantages in general, with enough early game pressure possibility via the longbowmen, which forces people to overcommit to defense, especially being forced to overcommit to archers that get outranged, or horsemen, which were just nerfed, straight up nerfed. As the horsemen, with the 1 armor and the minus 30 health, take just as many shots from archers, but is worse against everything else. I think English are also tier A. I have to believe that they're still better than Abbasid. I believe they have more autonomy in the battle, in a game, than Abbasid Dynasty. They have better ways to do a rammel in. Their longbows exert more pressure than anything Abbasid can create. And I think that autonomy, that action in the game, it either puts them at the bottom, at the top of B, or the bottom of A. I'm gonna put them right there. Which leaves us with Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire has a few pretty cool things going for them. They've still got the bonus gold from the Regnus Cathedral relics, and prelates seem to be less bugged than before, but they're still bugged. There was no notes in the patch notes, but we were hopeful that they worked all the time now. Sadly, that's not the case. I've seen them stop working in Spire on wood villagers or food villagers in the Dark Ages, and that's a pretty big economy deficit. So you're still forced to go with Aachen Chapel every time so that it doesn't happen, which means we cannot delve into Minework Palace tactics at all. Just the risk of the prelate stopping to work, it's too bad. Holy Roman is still one of the few factions that has access to the Culverin, which is a bombard killer, a springald killer, which is pretty damn nice. And they've got the very insane, super strong Palace of Swabia, which produces villagers in 5 seconds for 12 food. I feel like Holy Roman could be tier A, but the bugs hold them back a bit, and also the fact that they... Actually, I think Holy Roman is tier B. I feel like they have a weaker... Yeah, they have the men-at-arms at the Second Age, which Abbasid doesn't have, which can be nice. But they are slow, and they can't really all-in anyone with them easily, because they get out-microed by everything, including longbowmen, including camel archers, including many things, actually. They will get Castle Age by 9 minutes and can start making horse archers. Holy Roman's men-at-arms got changed. They no longer get 170 health instead of 155 after upgrading the barracks upgrade, which is called two-handed weapons. This suffered from a design change. Somewhere in the development of the game before release, they must have had 15 health added to this, then they changed the idea, but they forgot to change it in game. So what this had been doing is it offered 15 health and 2 damage to all, but it took away 3 damage from heavy maces against heavy stuff. Heavy maces is supposed to offer +6, but after you got the second upgrade, the two-handed, this became +3 suddenly, which meant that men-at-arms did -1 to heavy after you got both. Like, still a total of +5 extra based on no upgrades at all, but -1 from before, and it should have been +8 if you read how everything reads. Now everything works as intended. This is +6 against heavy, and this is +2 against all, but no more 155 health. However, every single faction in the game has received an upgrade to how Elite Army Tactics works. 20% health. And what that means is that fully upgraded Royal Holy Roman men-at-arms will now have 216 health after you get that elite upgrade, 216, instead of 198 with all of the upgrades that there are. So they have more health than before, the men-at-arms. It does mean other people also have stronger men-at-arms and spears, but Holy Romans are best. The Holy Romans men-at-arms are best. So we're going to be using this upgrade more often than French will be using this upgrade, because they're maybe going to Royal Cavalry more often. So overall, men-at-arms are better than before the patch. They don't have the 15 health from Castle to Imperial anymore, but when they get Imperial, they've got more. And they're doing more damage than before. 3 extra against Royal Cavalry, against any cavalry, compared to before. The Landsknecht is decent actually, and does have more health now with that special elite army tactics upgrade, but it's fairly overcasted. It can actually wreak havoc on villagers when a player doesn't look immediately. You put 2 Landsknecht in a Mongol steppe redoubt and it takes them only 2-3 seconds to slay like 10-20 villagers, which is insane. But they are 100 gold. That is pretty damn expensive. You can only do that, make some of them, if you secure all 3 relics, which has been tough for Holy Romans as people get better at counterplay. The Rus quickly rush castle and they get warrior monks from their landmark, which are mounted, therefore fast. They can get to castle quicker because their scouts bring back more deer corpses than what the Holy Roman can, because we sacrifice villagers for it. And many factions have gotten better at counterplaying the relics, where they try to get 2 or even 3 or 4 away from you so that you only have 1, 2 or 3 in your command. If you have 3, you're happy. Your Regnitz Cathedral is getting 900 gold per minute, which is insane. But if you have 2, that's 600 gold, and it does make a big difference. Overall, I think Holy Roman is a strong faction that's pretty average in strength. I'm going to be putting them on tier B, either over or under Abbasid, which is kind of hard to judge. The bug on the prelate is holding them back. I'll say they're definitely here if the prelate gets bugged. I do need to say there's a few new bugs on the prelate that I tested. For example, before you could inspire all of your siege units, as far as I know. Now you can just straight up not inspire Springles anymore. And you may say, hey Grubby, inspire units? Isn't that a villager only ability? Well, normally that's true, but I have been playing around with battle prelates. And if you take a look at the monastery, there's this upgrade. Inspired warriors. +1 armor. And the 15% bonus damage. And that's really strong. Like, all you need to do is to put prelates next to your army, go AFK. It works only when they're out of combat, not in combat. It lasts 30 seconds, so right before a fight, you put 10 prelates in a ball of 30-40 units, and after like 5 to 10 seconds, everyone is inspired. +1 armor and +15% bonus damage. And that used to work on Springles and Mangonels and so on, but I've tested it. Someone said you could only always inspire bombards, but I don't think that's true. I've inspired other things. But anyway, let's say if it is true, Zweiflowers. You cannot inspire Springles. I tested this yesterday. They will permanently try to inspire Mangonels, but this doesn't work. So they'll keep doing the animation and be stuck and never do anything else. They think they can, but they can't. You can inspire trebuchets, either automatically or manually. And I haven't tested these two. So there are bugs with combat prelates right now, in where they're not sure if they should be doing this. They feel a little guilty about inspiring siege. They're trying it. You think you can, you can't. Everyone has a different rule. So yeah, not super worth to go into inspired warriors, because if you've got any mangonels, they're gonna get stuck in animation. Finally, there's also 2 game-breaking bugs right now. The developers added brace mechanic automatically when spearmen are on attack move. Before, you had to hit stop or stand your ground. Now, attack move spearmen will stop cavalry charges. But for some reason, Delhi and Holy Roman spears will never brace, neither in the old method or the new method. So right now, Holy Roman and Delhi spears suck so bad and cannot deal with cavalry. And that hurts. That means you are forced to go into men-at-arms, archers or horsemen, and cannot use spears. So both of those are weaker. That means that right now, Holy Roman at best can be, sadly, can be here, because they're still going to take damage from French and early knights without really being able to do much against it. Had that brace bug not been there, I might have placed them here or here. And that's my tier list for now. Do you agree, disagree? Make sure to angrily talk to me in comments to convey your idea, and I will leave a snappy answer. No, let's discuss it. Did I have anything wrong? I'm angry. Did I get anything wrong? Do you agree, disagree? Do you think Chinese should be maybe rank 1, Holy Roman higher? Let me know. And if things change, especially with bug fixes, I may do another one next week. Do you want to see it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.